Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the Discord discussions. This week we are going to approach a topic that I'm sure will be considered a bit of controversy comparative to some of the other ones we've done. We really haven't gone into anything that could be, I guess, considered controversial. We've made observations of the observable world. And one of the things that I think we really have to do today, and I'm hoping we'll accomplish with this podcast, is put a perspective on the narcissistic society that we've somehow managed to create in less than 15 years. And in this cast, I'm sure we're going to define narcissism. We're going to unpack it in a lot of
Putting
different
some in
lights.
the side there.
So, one of the things that I want to consider with this topic is that social media has a big influence on the use of the term narcissist. It's thrown around anytime someone says something somebody doesn't like. Oh, you're a narcissist. You're this guy's narcissistic. And then there's people that I've known for years. I mean, people I've known since the 80s. And unfortunately a lot of time it's women who do it. They'll and I pay attention, right? You see people on their Facebook, oh, I have a new relationship. It's great. Life is grand. That's all awesome. And then in less than 2 or 3 months, they're going, oh, this guy was a narcissist. They're narcissistic. Why do I always get narcissistic men? And I'm sitting there going to myself, okay, I've been your friend for 3 decades, and every guy you ever date's a narcissist. Either that's not statistically probable or you're the common denominator. And I think that's not really either that's true. I think what it is we have taken a term to use it out of its real origin, and we use it to describe behaviors and trends of behaviors that are selfish, self centered. And I've looked at a couple of different ideas on how to start this topic. And one of the things that occurred to me is that there's a lot of biblical discussions and religious in general discussions about being self centered, right? And Jordan Peterson, I we use him a lot. He had made a quote that I thought was really poignant for this topic. And after I make the quote, I'm going to start with Fly, and then I'm going to go to Chris, and then Phil. And I want your guys' opinion. Jordan put it like this: whatever's at the top of your hierarchy is your God. And modern society today, the top of everyone's hierarchy, or at least it appears to be, is themselves. We have elevated ourselves into the place of our religious deity. So that to me becomes a serious issue, as no one can look past their own interest in a society that is determinist, that they're the center of the universe and their experience is all that matters. So, Fly, I want you to kind of input your thoughts on first, what would you use? Do you think the term narcissism is overused? Or do you think that it's a pandemic of social contagion? What's your thoughts on the whole societal narcissism that we're experiencing in our social media and the people around us?
I mean, we live in a world in America. I mean, that's the that's the key word. I mean, that's the main thing. The country is showing. We had narcissistic energy. I mean, we're the best. We're the best. We're the best. And I mean, yeah, the people alone gonna go with that, with the narcissistic energy that's put out in the world. And yes, I do see that people gaslighting, and I mean, it's a lot going on. A lot of people don't know themselves. To me, that is true. If you narcissistic, you make that a god. Some people, make themselves
I mean,
gods.
your name is First Love Yourself. Your
Yeah,
nickname
first
is
love
First
yourself.
Love
Yeah,
Yourself.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Because if
but
you don't
you're
love you, how do you expect anyone else to love you?
right. So
If
my
you don't
question to
accept
you is, how do you
every
manage
part,
that? How do you manage that and not be narcissistic?
I mean, you have to be a little bit narcissistic about yourself. I mean, if you don't love you completely, even your so-called what the world call flaws, how do you expect anyone else to love you? And I think that's what we're dealing with. A lot of people who we think are narcissistic and have start out good and have bad relationships, they haven't fully loved themselves. So that's where I'm at with that.
Chris, Phil, I'm sorry. Go ahead. ML.
Oh, is it me?
Yes, sir.
Let's see here. I'm just going to go through the because there's two words we're going to be talking. There's two kind of ideas we're going to be talking about related to narcissism. There's going to be the casual descriptive word narcissist or narcissism, and then there's going to be narcissistic personality disorder, as in the diagnostic and statistical manual for psychology, the DSM-5. So I'm just going to focus more on that because I'm a little more familiar with that, at least first. And then I'll get to the other stuff. But it's kind of interesting to see. So I'm going to read out uh, the nine diagnostic criteria. You need to hit 5 of these in order to be considered like possibly like you're in the diagnosis range for narcissistic personality disorder. So we'll just listen to these and consider these for yourself, others, and for maybe America as a whole. So, need to hit 5 of the 9. Number 1, grandiose sense of self-importance. I think America as a whole, um, I mean, you could argue about the grandiose, but yeah, I mean, and then on individual levels. Number 2, preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, and brilliance. So again, there's a lot of subjective words in here, like preoccupation. What determines a preoccupation? This is psychology, not hard science, so you can tell. Belief that one is special and unique and can only be understood by an associate with other by or can only be understood by or associate with other special or high status people. So in other words, yeah, you think you're pretty special and you only interact with other people who are very special. Um, yeah. Number 4, need for excessive admiration. Again, what constitutes excessive? Number 5, sense of entitlement. Oh dear. Well, a lot of people are failing there. Number 6, interpersonally exploitive behavior. So taking advantage of others to achieve your own needs. And then next, I think that was 6. Number 7, lack of empathy. Number 8, yeah, lack of empathy. Number 8, envy of others or the belief that others are envious of the person. So either you're jealous of others or you think people are jealous of you or both. In my experience, it's both. And last but not least, arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. So I've known one person who I know for sure was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. Thankfully, I don't have any contact with him anymore. It was decades ago. He came out through his divorce and his trial, and he was quite proud of it all. And he was just like he was one of the worst people I ever met. But at the same time, he was also he was also intelligent and articulate and funny a lot of the time. So it was enough to keep you coming back, but you eventually realized that he wasn't redeemable. That this shit it ran all the way through him. It was like being a child molester. It was just absolutely unrepentant. Um, Ultimately rejected by his entire family. And I've known one other who has never been diagnosed because he would never submit himself to such a diagnosis, but who in my minds is 9 out of 9 ultra narcissist, and his ex-girlfriend is a psych nurse, and not just any psych nurse, like a real mover and shaker in British Columbia. She is literally writing a book about this guy because his narcissism is so, because he's such a genius, he's so smart. Like, he goes to philosophy classes and the philosophy teachers don't know what to do with him for two reasons. One, he's saying things that sound correct that they don't understand about their subject. And two, he is like such an asshole. Everyone hates him. Like, the class immediately hates this guy, and so does the teacher. And to the point where the teachers will go and seek out his other friends in the class, pull them inside, and be like, "So what's up with your buddy?" Like, literally at that level. So there is a clear difference. I'll just sum up as this: there's a clear difference between narcissistic personality disorder and someone being a bit narcissistic or acting a bit narcissistic. Because when you say, like, if you're seeing somebody who's like taking endless selfies, you know, it's like, well, to me, that's pretty narcissistic in that descriptive sense. But that doesn't come anywhere close to encapsulating the awfulness of a human being who's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So I guess my bit will just be to say that there is a big distinction between the two, and exploring that distinction and maybe how, like, one is how the terms are being conflated, and how one is being used to like how the descriptive narcissist is being used almost like to steal some of that clinical language from the diagnosis, the effect of it. But anyways, I'll leave it there.
Mr. Bill.
Yeah, I was just looking at those definitions myself. I know you mentioned there was a lot of reference, at least from a biblical standpoint, and I want to kind of pull those in because it's relative, very relative, where it references many times you'll see in like popular, like if you just search like love yourself, like Bible verses, right? They'll come up. It's like love yourself, X, Y, and Z. And those are like the feel goods. And then you go to like Proverbs where it says basically haughtiness goes before destruction and humility precedes honor, right? And so then for anyone who thinks he is something, then he is nothing. He deceives himself. And so there's like
inherit the earth.
Yeah, and so then, and that's not even Proverbs, that's just Galatians. And so there's like, there's these references to it. And I think when you come to like self-entitlement, I think there's a pandemic specifically in the US, at least Western culture, for sure. And this digs deep, for sure.
So what I want to kind of, I guess, springboard off of is going to be, we have created a monetary system for being narcissistic. OnlyFans, Cash App, here, send me money. I need money. If you want to, just send me money. You know, I need money. If you know, and I'm great.
Even credit cards, like, right? or like speculative loaning. I mean, it's all very at the expense of anything reasonable. It's like, I'm going to buy a $5,000 television and max out my credit card, knowing that I'm barely going to be able to even afford the interest payments on the credit card bill. But it's because I want that TV now. I don't want to wait. You know, like,
that's also delayed gratification. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
that's mixed into it too. And it's all very like centered. None of it's. You're not even like. Here's maybe a way to think about it. I don't know if this is legit or not, but it's kind of like there's like you're almost being so narcissistic in that moment buying that television. Like, not only are you not thinking about any other people, you're not even thinking about yourself in the future.
No.
You're not even showing any kind of respect or deference or even recognition of the fact that you are going to exist in a future where you are made miserable by the decision that you're making today.
There's that
financial terms, and you know it.
It's that love your neighbor as yourself, and everybody knows that quote, but it references, it's like, well, then if your neighbor was going to go buy a $5,000 TV and they're only making X per month, and is that not a smart idea? Would you warn them? The answer is, well, yes. You know, or, you know, if my friend is going through a really difficult time, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to talk with them, be encouraging, I'm going to say, hey, it doesn't matter where you're at now, like, just push through it, it'll be fine. Give it time, right? Give it tension and time. It'll be fine. And would you do the same for yourself? No. And so
Well,
then we're harder on ourselves. And so you've got to find like that balance of, not necessarily, I don't want to use the
Well,
word
it should be
acceptance because it's been
consistent
abused.
too. If the advice is
Yes.
good enough that you're giving it to your friends in good faith, and
would you use
believe
it?
that it will affect good change on them, and then you have a similar situation in your own life and you're not using your own advice, to me it does kind of, and believe me, boy, if anyone is guilty of this, it would be me. And I give myself shit about it all the time because it's like, because it is inconsistent, like, and there is that's not good. There isn't
Well,
anything noble about that. It's kind of shameful, actually. Like,
it's
I
not
feel ashamed when I do it.
it's not narcissistic, but I think, and this is a little bit off topic, but you like, I'm very, very critical about myself, very critical. And so,
well, you know what? This is the inverse of narcissism. Just to say, like, I think this is on topic. I think we're going to be talking about narcissism and its inverse humility. But
so
Yeah,
then,
I would
so then,
agree
like,
with that.
there's a very definite tilt toward full being critical about yourself. Like or I think it's Andrew Huberman on his podcast was talking about a bit where him and his girlfriend were going out to a beach and they do this ritual together. And he had a note where he had a saying that he was going to say over the little moment that they were going to have, and it's very important for their relationship. And while walking to the beach, it was windy, and he lost the note when he got there. And so while he was walking back to his car, he's like, "Well, this is just absolutely terrible. I'm a neuroscientist, and I can't even keep up with a note. What a failure am I?" And so then even further down that path is, if I can't do this, then like what else am I doing wrong, right? And so you can keep going down that spiral. We've all been there. But you could also say, which is the upturn, which is, well, anybody could have made this mistake, right?
Right. And
So
well, I think that a person and the person in that hypothetical who is a neuroscientist but loses a note and really gets down on
despondent.
himself as this massive failure, to me that's only that's a pretty disproportionate response to the error. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, any fool can lose or any smart, like, I'm sure Einstein probably
Fly.
forgot where he put his glasses
Yes,
sometimes. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
So you have a unique experience that the three of us don't. You've had your freedom taken away. Okay. And I would venture to say that has a pretty impactful associative value to how you view yourself, right? So when you're incarcerated, your ability to move freely, to do what you want, say what you want, has been impeded, and your value as a human is massively reduced. And then when you come out into society, your value is still very low. Your stock is low, but you've amassed new stock to the point in which you're a successful businessman. You have a great family. You have a published book. You've gone against a imposed negative, right? So the only way to do that is to have self belief, but you're able to do it without falling into the trap of, oh, I'm the greatest thing in the world, everybody should love me, right? So
well, and you would already know that's not true because, I mean, because of what happened, right? I mean, you've been, you get thrown into jail. That's got to be a pretty, like, come to Jesus sort of, like, if this doesn't get through, like, I'm not suggesting you were narcissistic or had narcissism, but, like, if, like, say, like, somebody who others think is like really, really narcissistic, and that person goes to jail, and, like, big boy jail for a few years, and they come out of it and they're still the same way, I would assume that they have, like, narcissistic personality disorder, because I would assume that jail
would improve you.
well, it would, at the very least, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, person who's actually been to jail, but I would assume that it gives you, it's a collision with reality in terms of your own abilities. Like, if you think that you're really hot shit and you just haven't been in an environment where there's enough disagreeable people to tell you that you're not, and then you get dropped into an environment where it's just a bunch of disagreeable men who are itching to tell you that you're not, I think that if you're really labored with delusions about your own abilities, that prison would cure a lot of those. Correct me
Well,
if I'm
yeah,
wrong.
yes and no. I mean, you have to believe in yourself, and that
Well,
goes through
sure,
different. Yeah,
but
it
you're going
goes
to
through
believe
different
like
stages of
rationally.
being
You're not going to
incarcerated.
believe that you can like. You're not going to go into prison. Like maybe if you went into prison thinking like, oh, I'm a big tough guy, I can take care of myself, and then like you get your ass kicked your first day in prison. Like what should happen is you like not you should suddenly
It
turn into
creates
a
humility.
But
well, yeah. To be
it
clear, it
does.
doesn't
It does.
turn. It
It's
shouldn't
nothing
turn you
like
into like a bitch, but it should at least make you
Mel. It's
realize,
nothing
okay,
like
I'm
you
not the
see on
toughest guy.
TV.
Go ahead.
And Mel,
Let Fly talk.
it's nothing like you see on TV. It's nothing like you see in the movies. All that shit is fake. Okay, prison is not like that. We have a lot of people who never ever physically been to prison, but they are in prison mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Well,
So, but
what's the similarity?
so when you take yourself physically being in prison, it's you go through a lot of stages, man. You go through like if I'm, what was my decisions? Understand what I went through. Did I fall this low as a human being? I remember going out in the fields, and this was over almost 30 years ago, and I'll never forget the guy name. It was in the 90s, 1990, by the way. And we go out into the fields. They give us an Aggie hoe or a garden hoe, and you have lines of 10 to 15 people in rows, and you chopping down grass. And the guard or the prison officer be on his horse with his gun, and he's like going into everybody's asses, like berating them and fucking inmate, fucking bitch ass inmate, you're nothing, you're worthless, this and that. And so the second week, we're picking cotton. I'm talking about like in the 90s, like it was in the 1800s, dude. And we're picking cotton, 100-degree weather, July, right now. And he directed his verbal judo at me. He's kept cursing me and calling me slick. And I said, hey, sir, no. Put your Aggie down, inmate. What the fuck do you say? I said, no, sir. I put your hand behind your back. I did that. I said, you're not going to keep cursing me. I'm still a man. I'm still a human being. No, the fuck, yes, the fuck I am. You're not going to keep cursing me. Well, I said what the fuck I want. I said, no. I said, not by your rule and conduct as an officer. Huh? Yeah. Article 44, 13, 401, Section 1.10b, VACS, Procedure 14, malicious use or profane abuse of language toward an inmate client of the state is prohibited. Rule 28, untitled, improper uniform. You don't even have a name tag on. Must we continue, sir? Well, back in line. And that very next day, dude, I wrote a grievance on a complaint. He called me out. It was midday. Butler! Put your Aggie down, Butler! I put my Aggie down. He ran horse up on me. I put my hand behind my back. He said, I thought we was friends, dude. I said, no, we're not. What? I thought we was okay, man. No, we're not. Where are you from? I said, I'm from Dallas. Okay. I said, no, sir. No. You're going to respect me like I respect you. And at that moment in my life, being in prison, that's when I knew. I said, man, we teach people how to treat us, even in a situation like that. And you know what this guy said? He said, I have one question to ask you, Butler. I said, what's that? Shoot. Ask. What did I ever do to you? And that night, that evening, I was given a job change to a clerk in the kitchen. Even in there, you have to have self-worth of yourself, even in places like that. So yeah.
Fair enough. And as I'm listening to that, it occurs to me that the prison guard had no self awareness that what he did was wrong.
He didn't.
There was
Well, he did
nowhere
many
in
people
his
like
head.
that. Nobody called him out on this shit. That's what happened.
Nowhere in his head did he think that I should treat these men better, right? That their value didn't exist. So, and to me, that's a definite form of narcissistic opinion. That you can assess someone else's value.
Lesser than your own. That would be a reference to one of the points of narcissism And it seems interesting. Like you, in that environment, you had enough self-worth to say, I do matter, and you understood the principles that he and the guidelines he had to follow, and he didn't, and he disregarded your value. Period. Is that what I'm getting? Is that the same?
That's exactly,
Okay.
yes. On point.
It also sounds to me, ironically enough, it kind of sounds like he was acting out some kind of guard stereotype from a movie or television show. Like
Well,
that
yeah,
sounds
I
like
can agree with
that sounds like really, like, it sounds like he's seen Shawshank Redemption too many times and identified with the wrong characters.
What happened?
Like,
What happened? I got hold of the general room conduct. They call it PD-22. You can look it up. They call it PD-22, Texas Department Criminal Justice. I learned their rule book, something that an inmate / offender is supposed to have their information. I had the information for a couple of days. I wrote it all down, and I memorized all 41 rules. And I'm just being honest with you. They helped me do my time when I was doing time.
well, it makes sense to me to know the rules of the place that you're incarcerated in, and these rules can be enforced with up to and including lethality. So yeah, I mean, because the guards on the walls generally have rifles, right? So I mean, yeah,
Well,
it makes sense to know the rules.
well, there's an interesting thought, and I was sitting here considering um, TikTok, right? And
Ugh. Okay,
I
let's
know.
bring it back to narcissism,
Yeah.
because TikTok to me immediately just like, yeah, endless selfies,
Okay.
weird dance videos, yeah.
So my question with TikTok is, because there's a lot of things that are bad that come out of TikTok. You've seen our
Like most of it.
well, we've seen the rise in the social transgenderism, the social contagion of that, and to me
Being
that
studied as that, yeah.
that strikes me as a super narcissistic thing. Just the
Well,
idea
and it's also,
that I can make a decision of who I want to be, and I'm going to compel the rest of the entire planet to ignore observable reality.
yeah,
That
it's like
is, to me, screams.
oh, what's that? There's a philosophical concept that it's basically that. It's called solipsism, and um, it's basically like self, or like reality is dependent upon the self. So like you are the center of your reality, and like, I mean, you've seen like some of these bimbo Miami girls on on these podcasts talking about manifesting. It's funny, they're all like, if you ask them if they believe in conventional religion, they're like, no, I don't believe in God. Oh, religion, you know. But then you ask them about like manifesting stuff, and like they'll start throwing out all this weird spiritual woo that's just like makes no sense. It's not coming from anywhere. But I mean, there's just trying. I was trying to think of what. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought about there. Now I'm just thinking about that idiocy. Just give me a second. Somebody else talk.
So, Phil, you are probably the least
Oh,
social
sorry.
media.
Let me go back. Let me
Okay.
finish. The solipsism thing. They talk about like so what's his name at the Everything podcast will bring up some stats, or
Brian.
Myron on Fresh and Fit, who I hate, will bring up some stats. And I've seen it so many times where one of the guests will say, you know, like he'll say that's reality, and they'll say, well, that's not my reality.
Oh yes.
And they don't mean it metaphorically. They don't, like, they're speaking literally. They literally, and because when you probe them further, they'll talk about people's lived experiences as though it's this bubble of reality that we all have each. And when we come together, our bubbles are kind of like meshing and pushing against each other. And that's, of course, where postmodernism takes over, because postmodernism like in postmodernism's view, there is no truth. All there is like power games, just people playing competing power games using words and force. And that just meshes perfectly with their thinking. They're not intelligent, and they're all leftist, but they're not intelligent enough to know anything about postmodernism. They just have this feeling that there are smarter people than them on their side that can explain this stuff better. And the people on their side that do explain it better reference postmodernism. That's why they talk about lived experience. That's why they have the autoethno. Okay, let's talk about narcissism in academia. So there's something called an autoethnography, and an autoethnography is this is only in the liberal arts, and it is you know what? I'll look up its definition in a moment. I'll just describe it from my own memory first. It's basically a diary. It's a personal diary, and it is submitted usually as like as part of a master's or PhD thesis for like gender studies, queer theory, any of these like bullshit postmodernism, liberal arts, so-called disciplines that they give degrees in. And um, I'll pull up a few crazy examples, but it's literally a personal diary. And it's just so it'll just be like exploring. It's always like left. It's always filled with leftist identity words. So it's like exploring my journey as a queer, black, furry, femme who uses they them pronouns through a trans masculine space going to a strip club or whatever. Like it's so it is like it's indistinguishable from parody that you would write if you were a comedy writer who was trying to make fun of these disciplines and the things that they come up with as actual work.
Well,
If this is what you would come up with as a comedy writer, and they're literally doing
well, the thing about it is, you actually bring up a really interesting point about that. Is the libs of TikTok? Okay, one of my favorite Twitter accounts because it's
the
hilarious.
best thing of TikTok.
Okay, libs of TikTok literally became famous for just reposting what these people actually think and publish. It's not that she's making it up. It's not that she's having it AI generated. She's just repeating what they are believing, that they're saying.
It's reached that level where you no longer need to use hyperbole. You don't need to lie or exaggerate. All you have to do is accurately quote them.
Oh, no. Repost their thought. And that to me
just
is
quote
like
them accurately. It used to be like when things were close back in like the 50s when the liberals and conservatives were all pretty baseline and all pretty close to the center. Like I think you would see a lot more kind of like little dirty tricks here and there in terms of like and little hyperboles, little exaggerations, little rhetorical tricks like that. Now, I mean, you can do that if you want to, but you don't need to. No. Because what the worst of each side is saying
publishing
some stuff that is just mind-blowingly stupid. Like it is just here. Let me just quickly, just to follow up with that. So this is the Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is about as left as it gets. Let's talk about in the spirit of libs of TikTok. I'm just going to read a couple of sentences about what an autoethnography is. Autoethnography is a form of ethnographic research in which, and that's a hyperlink, in which a researcher connects personal experiences to wider cultural, political, and social meanings and understandings. So in which a researcher connects personal experiences to wider cultural, political, and social meanings and understandings. So you parse that language. It's a personal diary, for example. If you're a queer black woman, you can talk about just like I'm a queer black woman and I'm going to start bowling. I'm going to take up bowling in a men's bowling league, or not a men's, but just like a just a mixed bowling league. But it's like mostly white people, well, whatever, and all straight people. And I'm just going to record my experiences in that, and then I'll accept my PhD. Autoethnography has been used across various disciplines, including, so all the disciplines I'm about to list, by the way, I consider, by the allowing of this, I consider these disciplines to be at the bare minimum infected and probably corrupted to the point of uselessness for most of them. So here we go. Anthropology, arts education, communication studies, education, educational administration. This is why it's coming up in your schools. English literature. That's why I'm not a professor of the thing that I have a degree in. Ethnic studies, gender studies, history. That's why history sucks now. Human resource development, marketing. Well, marketing always sucked. Nursing. Yeah, social working too. Oh, that's coming up. Organizational behavior, paramedicine, performance studies, physiotherapy, psychology. Sadness. Social work, sociology, and theology and religious studies, which have never really been considered academic. They've always been considered their own thing, which is called theology, which has its own distinction. It is what it is.
Yeah, that's very apparent.
It's called
Very
seminary.
apparent.
There's an actual specific college for it.
Well,
so
yes.
I don't have a problem with it there because I don't consider what they're doing science. So it's fine. It's like, it's not contradicting anything. That's fine.
So, Phil,
you're all talking to God, and then you're comparing experiences. I don't see an issue with that. That makes sense to me.
So the thing that's interesting about that, and I want to get Phil's take on this because Phil's the youngest guy in the room. How have you managed to not fall victim to the TikTok infection of me? How have you not, you and I were chatting last night.
Don't assume.
I know.
Don't assume.
Well, I know him pretty
Phil,
well.
have you fallen victim to the TikTok?
There's no evidence yet.
Are you a narcissist?
We haven't seen any
Prove
evidence of it
not.
yet,
Yeah, I know.
But the thing with Phil is, we were chatting last night and we were having a discussion. I'm like, Phil, you're not dumb. And he was like, he tends to be I hate the term self-deprecating. It's not really. He doesn't do that in any real intent, right? He has a good self-image, and I know that about him. I've known the man for a long time, and you've managed to align yourself and associate with men double your age, and can carry your own in any conversation, intellectually, socially. In business, I see you interact with people twice your age, twice your experience, and I see them listen to what you say and then, I agree because what you're saying makes sense. So how is it that you've been able to escape the idioms or the stupid, other than the fact that you dropped out of public education at 12? So, to me, it's hilarious.
Yeah, well, I dropped out of homeschool education at 12. I never went to public education. I think some of that had to do with my upbringing, where I worked with my father, and then I was always working around much older men. And so it felt normal to me to kind of work with those types of people at a much higher age bracket. And then also on top of that, you're looking to learn from people who have had experience rather than, okay, there's a difference between learned experience and then people who've experienced something. It's like if you were to say, well, I went on a roller coaster. It's like, okay, cool, right? Or I work this job and I've been doing it for 40 years. Here's what I do, right? There's two different types of experience. And I think some of that is a wisdom-based experience. And so do I find myself watching some YouTube shorts from time to time? Yes. Do I spend hours No. No. My YouTube feed is mostly just lectures, bits and bobs of information, history. It's not, no. And I don't take pictures of myself. I don't post up on social much if not at ever. I think the last one's like 2016, so if that tells you anything. It's a utility. It's not something that I look for affirmation. I don't find interest in any of that. It's not, It's not where I find my self image is in other people's acceptance of me online.
I just have an interesting thing, and it's just a bit of a further on the academic stuff I was talking about. So, in this is just a quote from Albert Einstein. I'll just read it. Science without epistemology, and epistemology is theory of knowledge, without epistemology is, insofar as it is thinkable at all, primitive and muddled. However, no sooner has the epistemologist, who is seeking a clear system, fought his way through such a system than he is inclined to interpret the thought content of science in the sense of his system and to reject whatever does not fit into it. The scientist, however, cannot afford to carry his striving for epistemological systematicness that far. He must therefore appear to the systematic epistemologist as an unscrupulous opportunist. And it's just basically like it's kind of a muddled way of saying it, but there's Einstein for you. Like, there's a problem in academia itself where, like, epistemology collided with, I mean, like, Hume came around and said some things that kind of, like, broke thinking itself, and, like, we haven't really recovered from, but whatever, we've just kind of ignored him and moved on with it. But like the problem kind of remains, and you get to the point now with postmodernism where you've got postmodernism, and postmodernism is what underlies all of the liberal arts, and what underlies the rational sciences is empiricism and logic, and the two are absolutely incompatible. And you get to a point where, like, to me, the to bring it back to solipsism, like, because it's the same thing. Postmodernism denies the ability to know truth itself, and they deny that, like, an objective reality exists when you get right down to it. And that is just the ultimate narcissism. It's like, it's saying, it's rational, it's justifying, it's constructing a system whereby your experience
Trumps
is,
everything.
well, it's at the highest level. There cannot be a higher level than you. Anything trying to say it's above you is just using power games to try and dominate and control you. That's the Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that, and that is what undergirds postmodernism. And it is so insanely selfish. It's so self-centered. It's like the deepest narcissism to say that when I close my eyes, reality stops. If a tree falls in the forest, well, if I'm not in that forest, it don't make no sound. It didn't even fall. There is no tree and there is no forest until I'm there to perceive it. Like, that's the solipsist. And that's what these people, well, postmodernism literally believes that that's how the world works. And these people that, like, are way downstream from academia, where these ideas don't have any of their, like, context, they're just being kind of delivered via teachers and administrators and whatnot by fiat, just by force, just by, like, we'll do it or we'll shame you and we'll cancel you. Yeah, it's really odd. It comes off as very odd stuff, and it comes off as reality denying, and that's because if you follow it upstream all the way back to its source, it is denying reality.
Here's an interesting thing that I thought of when you were talking about that, and there was a compilation on TikTok of news media like Don Lemon, like all of the major players in the left media were all saying, you know who to blame for all the deaths is the unvaccinated. They need to be shamed because they're not looking out for others. They should be shamed. They should be excluded. I can't think of a more narcissistic example in our society than the COVID reaction, where it was everyone trying to impose their belief on someone else. And it was done at a grand scale. And it was done.
Grand scale.
it was done, and I don't want to get down the weeds of COVID or any of the conspiracy theories because that over time that will tell that tale, and we don't need to actually try and predict the tale. It's going to come out, and the reality of it is, we have a culture that is 100% driven towards me and I, and everyone is always about what about me? Oh, don't you care about me and not get a mask? But you are selfish for not wearing a mask. In that sentence, I mean, come on. What level of narcissism do
Bit
you
of
have to
projection,
think
right?
that way? Yeah, if you cared about me, you'd wear a mask. If you cared
It's
about your
subjective
mom,
though.
if you cared about your grandmom, you get the shot. If you
So
cared.
so that's like a furthering bit of, because he mentioned perspective, and then you're talking about something that's very, very subjective, i.e. you should get a shot. You should get a shot or you shouldn't, right? That's subjective question and answer. So then you go
Well,
into
no,
like,
should or shouldn't is moral.
yeah,
If you're using
well,
should, it's a moral question.
okay. Um, but then you're talking about subjective perception, which is the lens you perceive society or other people through.
Well, but you're realistically, that conversation would be referencing more objective data, such as the efficacy of vaccines, et cetera, their history of use.
Well,
It's not very subjective.
But the thing that was interesting about it is our society was trying to enforce a edict on people through what to me appears to be a narcissistic lens. It's like, wow, that's crazy how we had people saying, oh, we should shame you because you didn't do
There
something
were
we
some,
wanted. And then me and Chris were talking
yeah.
yesterday, and this is kind of how the narcissism topic came up, was Chris had said to me, if you disagree with me, you weren't listening, right?
Oh, I was saying how that's a fair thing to, yeah, you know what, look, let me highlight that conversation. I was talking about how this is something that I'm hearing a lot, like not just in my own life, but I'm seeing a lot online and just everywhere, is people will say, you're not listening to me. And what they mean, like, which is nonsensical most of the time. Like, I've had people say that to me. I had an angry customer say that to me after I had just spent like 20 seconds restating his entire complaint and then the solution. And because he didn't like the solution, it wasn't the solution that he wanted. He said, "You're not listening to me." And I said, "Sir, I just repeated what you said, and I can do it again. I assure you, I'm listening to you." And then he said, "Oh, no, that's not what I mean." And I'm like, "Okay, well, my semi-autistic brain, I'm just like, no, the words mean things, and that's what you said." But I wasn't argumentative. But to our point, to the point that Brian and I were having, people are saying that, and I think okay, so here's my speculation. This is just pure knee-jerk pop psychology, but indulge me. At least what I was thinking about with Brian, I was like, it's almost as though they're so narcissistic that, like, they're so up their own butts that in their head, like, they have, like, whatever we're arguing about, in their head they have the argument that's what they believe, and it's like, in their head, it's airtight. There's no way any reasonable person could possibly disagree with this. Open and done, like, it is done. And so then they articulate it, and in their mind, of course, they're like, I articulated it well, I've done this before. And then the other person, well, because this is absolutely the truth, you're telling them 1 + 1 = 2, even though it's about something that's way more subjective. When the other person fails to just go, "Oh, you're right, thank you for enlightening me," when they do anything other than that,
you're not listening.
The only way they can reconcile that in their head is, well, not all the data must have gotten through. Because if you get all the data of my idea through, you will be convinced and you will change your mind in the moment and you will tell me. And it's like, of course, nobody would ever. Again, this is just speculation on my part, and what in terms of like what's really operating underneath. Because to me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like you know what these words mean; these are very basic words, and you're using them to mean something that is categorically false, as evidenced by the fact that my replies to your words
Are concurrent.
tailored to your previous words and reference them. That proves that I've listened to you, like deductively.
What do you
So
think,
when
Fly?
you say I'm not listening, it's like, well, you mean something. What do you really mean? Do you mean you're not agreeing with me and how dare you disagree with me because I'm perfect and I'm right about everything? Because that's what it feels like to me.
Fly?
Yeah, that's
You come across that? People, oh, you're not listening.
well, yeah, type
When
work
you
we do.
are listening, you are engaged.
Now, there's also, okay, now, I'm going to be the devil's advocate for a minute on the people saying you're not listening to me. What they probably should be saying is, are you comprehending what I'm actually saying? Are you getting the intended idea of what the words that are coming out of my head? Because I've
There are
had
some
that
legitimate
experience.
times.
Right, so I've
Like
had that
if-
experience
yeah.
where I've said something to people when I'm teaching a salesperson and they're just like, duh. I'm like, dude, are you even fucking listening to the words I'm saying? And they're like, yeah, I heard you. I was like, yeah, okay, then repeat it back to me. And oh, I can't. Right? And it's like, okay, yeah,
Right,
you're
yeah.
legitimately
That's a
not
thing.
listening.
That's
Okay.
a thing. Yeah.
So
yeah.
there
So, like
there
I
is
said,
a balance
the
between those
context
two.
is like my responses
Mhm.
to your words are
I-
tailored to your words and are referencing your words. So I'm not giving like generalized statements that could apply to a wide range of situations. I'm giving like you say I had a problem with X. I respond, you had a problem with X. I have a solution for that. It's Y. And then then I say, Y will fix your problem with X thus. And then you say,
Nah.
you're not listening. No, you can't, like, words have meaning. And the thing you just said is categorically wrong. It's not subjective, it's deductive. I cannot have said the things I said unless you think that I just coincidentally and randomly issued forth some generalized statement that just happened to perfectly conform to the fact pattern of your specific situation. Like, who are we playing fairy tale games here? Like, even no.
Do you have this? You kind of come across this experience, Fly?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
It's very
people.
frustrating to me as a literal person. Say what you mean. I am listening incredibly intently. Half the time I can repeat your ideas and phrases back to you in a better form than you issued them. So I just find it incredibly frustrating when people tell me that I'm not listening, when they actually have. It's like, if you have 100% of my focus, that's rare. And when I'm on the job, when I'm at work, when I'm on the phone call, you have 100% of my focus. And like, and you're not like, I guess it's me sounding a bit arrogant, but it's like, you don't get that a lot because most things don't need that, but professionally you get that. So, and then you're like, oh, you're not listening. It's like,
Well-
I'm taking notes, motherfucker. What do you mean I'm not listening? What do you mean? Like, words have meanings. Use the right words. Sorry, now it's turning into a rant. But
Phil?
Yes is the answer. And I think that, like, from ML's example, I think the answer there is, okay, then tell me what I missed, right? Because you could sit there and argue
what's
with
the
them saying,
sentiment?
well, I totally got your X and I gave you Y, but I missed something. What did I miss? And then there's like a 50% chance they can't even articulate that reason, but there's also a 50% chance they add new information to the topic. And you're like, that changes everything. Well, then now there's a new why, right?
In this case,
And so,
like, in this case, it was that he, there was new information,
Mhm.
but really it was that he wasn't being clear enough with, like, what. Well, I mean, I came up
They were
with.
being concise in their speech.
He gave me he gave me his operating criteria, and I came up with the best solution before that, and he didn't like it because it still involved using this courier that he had been having a rough time with and who currently had his package. And I'm like, okay, but you said you wanted this as fast as possible, and that was your number one metric. Well, okay, the fastest possible way is to operate with the courier that already has it in the depot 10 miles away from your house, rather than creating an entirely new order from a different province, right?
Yep.
But that there was a good learning experience for me, because what I learned from the interaction was to not be so literal and to judge the sentiment of the thing. So when he said, "You're not listening to me," he didn't mean it literally. I was listening to him better than anyone he had engaged with before, and he told me that afterwards when things were calmer. But what he meant was he didn't like my solution. And the reason he didn't like my solution was because he actually was going to refuse to ever again work with that courier because of how his experience with them. And I didn't want to get into a situation where I was trying to litigate between the courier and our customer on who's right and who's wrong. But I will say, in deference to this guy, like, I didn't believe him a lot at first, but the more I investigated, the more I was like, well, there's actually something going on. But this courier, I'm not going to get into specifics, but this courier company is actually violating its own processes openly with this guy and charging us money to not do the job that we've paid them to do without telling us why and keeping the money. So it was all very interesting. But yeah, I really had to learn. I learned on the fly, because he just got more frustrated with me, and then I started getting frustrated with him because I'm like, "You're not making any fucking sense, buddy, and I'm overtime. But no, we got there, and then he loved me. At the end of the day, I gave him, I told him. So we had like a 10-minute conversation just afterwards, and I didn't want to end it because you don't want to ruin the rapport that you've managed to build. Considering how pissed he was, I want to talk to a manager. He says 2 minutes to close. I'm like, really? But yeah, he started talking, and he's like, he doesn't believe in moon landings, and
Oh man. Oh.
big conservative guy. He lives in Alberta. I said, hey buddy, if you ever just go. What did I say? I said, go look up Discord discussions and look for the videos that have the least views, and you'll catch me. You'll recognize my voice. So I don't know. Maybe he's watching this. Kudos to you if you are, buddy, because we ended up. Yeah, he was pretty mad at first, but we got there.
But there's an interesting thing around narcissism and selfishness, and I think there's an inherent selfishness in the human condition. And I don't want to necessarily make this podcast entirely about bashing people who are.
Well, let's talk about the balance, because you need
right,
to have.
And that's where I'm kind of
like
going.
Fly was saying, Fly didn't abandon belief in himself when he went to jail. Quite the opposite. I think most of the, if not all, it's probably definitionally true to be a successful person. Unless you completely fluke into it, you're going to have a lot of belief in yourself.
And you're going to battle with it. Okay, you're going to battle with that a lot too.
I'm going to drive myself under the bus for a minute, and I'm an expert on me. I've been me for the longest time, and
nobody knows you better than you. We're all
I'm an expert on me. And I've made the joke for years that my ego would show up to the dealership an hour after me in a tractor trailer, because I couldn't possibly fit my head through the fucking door if it was on me as a person. So, and part of that ego and truly a narcissistic aspect of my person came from being ridiculed unmercifully as a child. I mean, I was put down at a level that most people wouldn't endure without putting a bullet in their own head. And
so it made you want attention, crave attention.
I was the middle
crave
kid.
Approval.
Oh yeah, I've literally told bosses in the past, dude, I'm an attaboy. If you give me praise, I will run to the end of the fucking world for you, because it's just my driver. I have always liked praise, so my wife knows that about me. And is it a flaw? Possibly, but on the same token, my success is because of that.
It's not a sin,
right? So I've been very competent in my professional career. I've been competent in my personal life with my family, with my wife. I view my life very positively, but I also know that, man, I've got so much room to change and grow. Like, there's a Christian song that I really listen to pretty often. Every day on my way to work, I play this song. It's, be less like me, right? I'll be more humble, be less like me, more like Jesus, right? Because he's the ideal when it comes to not being a narcissist, right? He was humble. He put others before him. Like, he's the ideal, in my estimation, for how an individual should comport themselves and be competent as well as to be humble. Because he went into where they were holding market in the synagogue and just wrecked it. I mean, threw the tables over, just blew a gasket. So he wasn't in any way, shape, or form a weak man, right? He held
I bring
people
not
to
peace,
account.
but a sword.
Yeah. So like, there's that balance that can be met, and he wasn't about him. It was never so. Hey, I'm the son of God. I can walk on water. I can raise the dead. Let me put your ear back on that Paul cut off. Let me,
Well, and to me, it's like it's sophisticated. It's the Old Testament God was kind of like a child. Everything was on the nose. Everything was very flashy. Uh, Old Testament God was kind of like directing a reality movie like Jerry Bruckheimer. And then Jesus it came along, or at least the conception of Jesus and his works. And yeah, Jesus is a much more. It's like the I guess it would be what I would say that the difference between like a sophisticated tyrant and a stupid one. The stupid one's just gonna publicly execute people, show off his power with like vulgar and over the top displays like, oh, you mocked one of the prophets for being bald, did you, 42 children? Well, I guess I'm sending bears to tear you apart. Like it really, come on, that's like Bronze Age Jerry Bruckheimer. Jesus comes around, and Jesus is a lot more sophisticated, because Jesus is like, hey, I am God. I could smite, like, in that knowledge, he's acting and knowing, like, I could literally unmake you with no effort. I could smite you. I could, yeah, I mean, you don't even have to finish. I could ...
and it's done.
and you would suffer forever with no effort. Yeah. And so a sophisticated, secure, intelligent consciousness should find that knowledge so incredibly settling and comforting that it should allow you to turn the other cheek almost infinitely, because like, you give a shit if some monkey slaps you. It doesn't hurt, and you can obliterate them with a thought. You can remake reality so that they never existed. Like, it's easy to take that. And so I'm not dissing Jesus. I'm actually praising him, because, again, in comparison to the old, you can think of it as like almost like new money and old money. Like, Jesus is the old money, where he doesn't need to show it off.
Yeah.
He has taste, he has sophistication, and he's like, you know what? We can all calm down a little. We don't need to go around. You don't need to annihilate the Amalekites anymore. You don't need to butcher entire tribes and enslave their blah blah blah.
But you gotta admit,
we're a little past that.
You gotta admit, the Jerry Bruckheimer phase was kind of like all the
Noah.
other neighboring,
Noah.
all the other neighboring nations were like, "Yo, this God's real." Like, there's no other God during that period that was referencing.
Real, I think we meant nuts. It was like
nuts. That's correct. I mean, Jerry Bruckheimer. We're talking about Jerry Bruckheimer here.
Sodom and Gomorrah, it's like, or like
not a like not a stone.
With the flood. No, with the flood. It's like, okay, so
but it's setting precedent, isn't it? You know?
Well, no, he didn't follow his own precedent, because it's like, look at the floods, right? People are misbehaving on a mass scale.
Okay.
Well, I could send them a prophet, or I could appear in a vision and give them guidance and wisdom, or I could annihilate them completely, flood the entire world, and start
again.
You'll notice that he did not follow that precedent ever again. He went with the more subtle and sophisticated versions as he went through anger management therapy with himself over millennia.
I think there's a lot of things, and I'm
But to
pretty
me,
religious.
As an
Yeah.
atheist, to me, what this is like the Bible is, you can't get away from it. It's the center of the Western canon, at least in terms of literary terms, and it's deep in a lot of ways. It touches everything, and
But there seems to be still holes that
well,
even I
it's a
have to agree that
description.
yes.
It's a continuous. You can see it as a continuous. It's like mankind's first attempts at science, at knowing reality, at setting rules on it, on understanding things. Like our desire to understand is so strong that like we don't need to. Our desire here's an idea. I think our desire to understand is stronger than our desire to be in control, because like our desire, because when we were in the Garden of Eden, we had like total control and everything was perfect.
Yeah,
And
how did we give
and
that up? I'm serious. I'm kind of pissed about this shit.
because we're human. Because
Yes.
and
So-
I think part of being human is that the
Free
desire
will.
to understand and know
It's
is
free will.
stronger than the desire. Well, free will is the ability to even have desires at all that we can express. But I mean, when we have free will and we have competing desires or principles, the desire for us to know and to understand our environment is stronger than our desire to have safety and security. And the Garden of Eden is the ultimate testament of that. We had safety and security
Everything.
at a level that is literally perfection.
We had utopia and we threw it away.
But the cost of that utopia was ignorance.
Well, here's the
Right?
interesting thing. Sam Harris.
Oh
yeah, you're right.
Just pause on that. Literally ignorance. Do not eat from the tree of knowledge. I don't want you knowing that you're naked and shameful right now. I delight of you in your natural, perfectly ignorant, because in that state, you're incapable of suffering. You're like everything, and the environment is incapable of producing an experience that will create suffering in you.
Nothing will eat
You will have
Yeah,
a
but it
perfectly
also seems
good
like
existence. And we, the first humans, looked at that deal and said, nah, and went for
Yeah.
the tree of knowledge immediately.
yeah, because we were set up for failure. That's why the first humans were set up. If
Sure.
God is all knowing,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
I don't blame God for that. Like, if God existed...
if God is all
like,
knowing, God would already know they was going to do
Yeah,
that in the get-go. Come on now.
Well,
It's like
there's
I think
there's
that
further
to teach us a
reference in
lesson. Like,
there's a
that's
furthering
who we
reference
are.
in there's furthering reference in
We can do
Genesis.
it right now. Louis C.K. said it best. Right now, if you know anything about cobalt mining, about like
Mhm.
lithium batteries, anything like that, the level of suffering that goes on in the production of all of our technology that we're using to have this podcast and our cell phones and our electric cars that everyone's so fly on, like that technology is produced at some of the worst cost of human suffering that
In
we've
history.
seen in human history. It is that, no hyperbole. It is so bad. I've watched a bunch of documentaries on it now, and that's just one example. To say nothing of all our cheap clothing, all our cheap everything that come from these sweatshops, in Malaysia and Thailand and China, etc., etc. So we could go back if we wanted to candles and horses, and be a little kinder to each other, and have a more equitable, fair society, basically communism without the overarching structure. We just all do it somehow magically by consent. But we're not. But even
That'll never happen.
if that was okay, but here's the point: even if that magic that makes the hypothetical possible without it deteriorating into brutal communism, like even if that magic was somehow possible, we would still reject it.
Yeah.
Just like we did in the Garden of Eden, and that's why anytime anyone, like, I think I'm definitely center right at this point. I'm definitely center, but I still consider myself, like, not a progressive, because that word's too loaded now and I have to do too much explaining, but a fan of progress, but proper progress, but progress nonetheless.
Progress mitered by logic.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's like rational progress. So we're not taking huge risks. But at the same time, I do insist on the forward momentum being kept. And I don't think it's at my insistence. Anytime I hear somebody talking about, like we need to go back. And they don't mean like in just like, you know, some descriptively one narrow, like they're talking in any kind of big way. I always laugh and, you know, like for example, Elon Musk saying we need to put a halt on AI research for 6 months, and there were a bunch of other people that signed some letter, and I laughed at that, and I said, like, I'm not laughing at them. I agree with all their
It's just never going to
points.
happen.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with all their logic. I agree with the sentiment behind it, and I'm touched by it, and it's good. I know it comes from a good place, but to me, it's so hopelessly naive to even think that that's possible.
So Sam,
That's not what we're like. If that was possible for us, I think we would have stayed in the garden.
So
I
interesting.
think we would have stayed in the garden, and it's not. No,
Sam
we're
Harris.
going to keep going.
Sam Harris was talking about AI, and in this AI talks about 8 years ago, he made a really, really brilliant point that I don't know that he
back 8 years ago. Sam Harris was making good points.
Okay,
He's not the same guy, sadly.
He said this, which was great. He goes, "What are we going to do when AI basically solves all of human suffering for the cost of light? We're going to have nothing to do, but we'll burn the fucking place down so something interesting happens." Because
we're going to give ourselves things to do.
It's
the optimistic counter to that.
But that's not going to happen. We destroy.
I disagree.
I think we destroy things. I think once AI has solved all of our essential needs, you will find debauchery is the only solution, and I think we're seeing that now.
We're gonna find a lot of debauchery.
So, take a look at. So
I don't think I'm very optimistic about a future. Like once we're past Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once we're all born into the top of the pyramid, like we have matter replicators, we've conquered aging, we've conquered disease. So basically, it's only like accident that kills people now. Maybe you can transfer your consciousness, like robots do all the dangerous work, all the work, period, if we want them to. Like, we can literally just, but at that point, to me, that is the point. Everyone who's talking about loving freedom, that's freedom.
But what about purpose?
Right, so there's human suffering. Hold on.
So that's where it gets interesting. I'm glad that you at least recognize that's where I think people have this immense failure of imagination. They cannot think of a purpose for themselves in that moment with a few minutes of thought, and from that they conclude that humanity will basically do, what do they call it in the French Foreign Legion? They'll get the bug, because they found in the French Foreign Legion that they were, in some cases, they were suffering more casualties when the Legion wasn't deployed than when it was, and it was still like soldiers killing each other and themselves, and it's just because they were bored basically, and they were like, yeah, you got a bunch of Foreign Legion too, you got a bunch of like criminals and mercenaries that are like persona non grata in their home countries. Yeah, you got to keep those guys fighting. They're good dudes as long as people are throwing hand grenades at them. As soon as they get point them in the direction of the enemy like a claymore, and they're great. But yeah, it's as soon as that gets away. So, but purpose to Phil's, because Phil is 100%. Purpose is what people seem to have this idea that if we are not struggling against those lower parts of Maslow's pyramid, that we will have no purpose at all. To which I say, bullshit. Okay, start with art and artists. Start with exploration. I mean, you can literally do whatever. Think of the video games. People will spend, like, if you have, say, an average lifespan of, like, I don't know, let's say a couple thousand years, it gets to that point, right? People will spend like a full normal human lifetime in VR, like totally immersive, like neurally, implanted technology and all that, neural interfacing technology, where it's we're talking like indistinguishable from reality. You can't even they're like video life simulations. People will be doing that and living lives as literal kings and queens.
It's called the Matrix.
Yeah, but like the positive part of it, like the pill, the pill that the trader guy took, it'll be that only under our control. for our benefit.
Maybe.
So you can program in a life, and
That
then
you
you
want.
wake up in it unconscious. So you don't even know anymore that you're in this advanced civilization where you're going to live for 5,000 years. You just think you're a normal
And
75-year
we're
person.
batteries. And we're batteries for
No. Again,
for the
see, why are
Matrix.
you taking it?
Because it's fun. Okay,
You're
I'm
so
gonna.
enamored.
I
Okay,
know.
but I'm going to point out you're so enamored with the negatives, and so many people are like you. Most people are like you. Most people don't think that we have a positive future. I'm one of the rare people that I encounter these days that acknowledges all of the shortcomings and downfalls and problems that are facing humanity in various forms. But I'm still quite optimistic about our
So
future.
I
I think it's just because I have a really good imagination. I'm like, if you give me that circumstance where I don't have to worry about aging, death, feeding myself, like anything, and you just give me access to like the super internet and perfect virtual reality simulation, and then your claim is that I'm going to be bored and I'm going to get destructive of this amazing utopia?
no. I'm saying
Never.
that.
And I would kill anyone who tried.
Well, here's the reality.
I would destroy them because they're
There's
dangerous to this wonder. We've constructed heaven. The suffering of countless trillions of human souls have led to the creation. Like we have heaven now in reality.
Well,
and someone wants to tear that down. Yeah, fuck that guy.
So there's also
On behalf of all former humans, fuck that guy.
So
because it's gonna be a dude.
But there's also a part of that, and I'm not wanting to go down that rabbit hole. I want to.
No, yeah, that would be another one. You know, we could do a topic. That would actually be an interesting topic where just like make it just kind of general, but just like optimism or pessimism for just like for the immediate and going further out in the future.
Well, that would be a pretty good topic. I agree because I think that would be something that
making a note of that in my head.
Generally, as a society, I think we're being told many different contradictions about the observable world and where we are.
But I think the one thing everyone agrees on that I've seen, both the left and the right, at least to me, seem to be both majority pessimistic about the future. The religious right is talking about end times, and the atheistic left is talking about the heat death of the planet happening in like 10 years. So both sides are using their own version of religious language to talk about end times. And I disagree with both of them on both theological and scientific, as well as humanist and really, I like lack of imagination is really failure of imagination. I think is what a lot of it comes down to. A lot of people who didn't read science fiction as kids, like the good sci-fi, not the stuff, not the book of stuff like Berserkers, but like the good sci-fi where shit works out well. Sure, we have challenges, but like we're dominating. Like we are the principal species of this universe. Maybe we weren't made in God's image at first. Maybe there's a bunch of other aliens out there too. But by the end of it, we're gonna be the gods. So like that's my vision. Well, it's like the Warhammer 40K vision. Just like humanity takes over the.
I'm bringing the topic back to narcissism. I'm done with the future.
You're wrapping it up.
I'm done with our utopian future of digital fucking bliss. So
no, because you hate the idea. I don't understand it. We'll engage it the next time.
We'll deal with that as a separate topic, and it'll be an interesting one in which we'll have, I'm sure, many disagreements. And
I'll be the lone futurist. Everyone else will be like doomsaying.
I'm the realist.
That's what the doomsayers all call themselves throughout history.
It's observable reality. Now, I'm going to go with a couple of closing points, and what I hope people get out of this discussion, and it's always my hope, is that there's more questions than answers. I don't think any of us are saying something that hasn't been said, but what I think we're trying to do is bring to light that we need to do better as a people. And part of that comes from realizing that we are not the center of the universe, that perhaps the pursuit of helping others, but not at the expense of someone else. Like, there's that old adage, and I've heard this, I don't know if it's just on one side, but a liberal is always willing to give somebody else's money away, but never their own. Like they're free with other people's money, and I think
They're also the NIMBY types, you
yeah,
know.
not in my backyard, right? None of
No.
Martha's Vineyard and sending up the immigrants there was a great example of that. They're like,
Yeah.
oh no, they can't be on Martha's Vineyard. No.
Oh, New
No.
York.
No. So
New York right now, I mean, they are effed.
right,
Philadelphia. Oof.
So there's definitely a narcissistic trend in our culture that needs to be curbed, and I think it's going to be actually the generation after Phil, because I play many video games online, and some of the video games I play with people that are 15, 18 years old, and they're all surprisingly conservative. Like these kids are like they think
Oh,
it's
I
all
saw a graph.
yeah, it's really
Just recently,
weird.
I think I sent it to you.
Yeah,
Like
it's like
the like it was like 16 to 24-year-old
like
males.
80%. It's a
Yeah,
high
in the
number.
U.S., it's super spiking. It's really high. Yeah.
So I think that is also going to bring about a change and probably bring humility back into fashion. I think what's going to happen probably is your OnlyFans and your women that have been sold the idea that the world revolves around them are going to find in their 30s that they can't find a mate, and you're going to find a very large swath of our population very discontented with their life and the outcome of which I think you're seeing the generation behind them going, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I already see where that's going. And you're going to see more, I don't like the term conservative. I want to come up with a better descriptor for
I
an
like
individual
conservative,
human.
like
humble people. We're going to see more
oh
people,
yeah.
more people that isn't all about me. They're going to be more about their. I think they're very high in conscientiousness. They're high in the idea that I'm sorry if I did something that offended you. I think they're beginning to take the good parts of progressivism, where equity is not about outcome, but about okay, I can equally help people around me. I don't have to just be helping me, right? I can lift those up around me. And I think that's where we're going to
And
achieve
ideally, you're
that's
like,
where I think we achieve that lack of human suffering, our basic needs are met. And I think that's where we're going to find a convergence of a really interesting future.
well, and hopefully, like that, like hopefully, when we're doing that too, the highest virtue is not aware of itself. So,
Yeah. So
it's good that people help others, but what would be better is if you help others without documenting yourself
doing
helping
it.
others
Like
and
you
then
see the
posting it
people
on
on
your social
TikTok,
media.
right? The TikTok of giving a
If
homeless
you
person
work at the
something.
soup kitchen,
Just
bless
do
you.
it.
And if you work at the soup kitchen and document yourself doing it, still bless you. Because at the end of the day,
The
I'm
people are getting
about
help.
results and people are getting helped. But I would like people to remember that it is, I think it's just categorical. I think it's just true, however you think about it, that the highest virtue is, in terms of what you should be shooting for, the highest virtue is not aware of itself. It's the good person who isn't doing good as part of a conscious process because they're like, yeah, if I do this, I can
get
document
that.
it on my social media, or even like, you can take it all the way to, if I do this, it'll get me into heaven. It's just, it's unthinking. It's you just do it, and yeah, that's Alan Watts says that's the highest virtue. Now that's I've argued with some Buddhists about that, strangely enough, but we could talk about that another time. But
What do you
yeah, I
think,
think
Fly?
it's humility agrees with that.
I
Fly?
think ego has a lot to do with it. Once you lose the ego, man, the ego is huge. And once you drop the E from ego,
You get to
mankind,
go.
humanity will come back
Yeah.
to what God
What's that religion that
need us to be.
believes in Satori,
Phil?
which is like the abandonment of that?
Phil, final thought, brother?
Yeah, I'm
It's
done.
good. Yeah, good train. We kind of diverted a little bit from
Well, I
NPD
think
a little bit, but it still was a good train of thought.
well,
Good end.
I think the thing about it is you can't talk about narcissism without having just the most negative podcast in the history of the world and not talk about its converse, which is humility. And those two things are, I think, the same coin. You know, the yin and yang effect. You can't have one without the other. You got to have a certain amount of self belief, self worth, along with the humility that, yeah, I have room for improvement too, right?
I posted in chat. I don't know if you saw it, but I wrote down. It seems to be self-conscious state, or like a healthy narcissism seems to be a self-conscious state, having a positive self-image, confidence in one's abilities, and a balanced sense of self-worth. Both the Mayo Clinic and GPT came out with kind of like similar answers, and they both reference a stable self-image without belittling or demeaning others or themselves.
Yeah. And we'll leave
Yep.
it on that note. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next week.